Good morning. My name is Diara Malik Kitty Reid. Um, I'm not going to tell you my age, but I identify as an African American woman by way of trans experience, meaning that trans does not define me. Excuse me, it's only the vehicle of which brought me to my womanhood. And I take that very, very, very seriously. Um,
That's
I
beautiful.
guess that's pretty much it.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Um, so it's Pride Month. We're nearing the end of it here. I can't believe it's almost the end of June here. And you and I have talked many times over the years, and you've talked about your gender identity journey. For people who might listen this particular time, do you want to give them like the Cliff Notes version? You parented a bunch of children and kind of found your true identity self, we'll say, at a later time in life. And now you're a caretaker also for your mother. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about your gender identity journey?
Well, God, I don't know. That's Cliff Notes. It's going to be hard to do this. Okay. How best to describe my journey? I followed all the society's rules and regulations, never questioned anything, just assumed that, what I was told was right by my family, my community, my church, everybody, um, who I was supposed to be. And I went along with the game and did that for 63 years. And it wasn't until, I was married to two cis identifying women. I had four kids and uh, three step kids. Most of my life was about parenting.
Oh no, did it freeze for a second here?
That's
Uh-oh, I lost you for a second. So you said most of my life was about parenting and then you froze.
okay. So most of my life was about parenting. I was always in relationships since I was like 21 and very little time in between the two marriages that I had. So I don't think I was not in a relationship more than maybe 2 or 3 years in my life. Um, so after about my last relationship with a cis identifying woman of 15 years, I thought that that was something that wasn't for me, that I couldn't make that work out as far as being a man, and trying to fulfill that role for a woman. I thought, I thought it was their fault, thought it was their fault, why I couldn't make it work, typical patriarchal attitude.
And then you started doing your own exploring, and then you found sort of, not this quickly, of course, but you found your way to where you are today, correct?
Well, pretty much, I decided to take the other kind of pill and explore what the world was really about and find out what my truth was. And all the years, the 63 years that I was living as a cis hetero straight guy, totally, never identified as a gay male whatsoever at any time. I always thought that I was a straight guy was in touch with his feminine side, right? I wasn't afraid of my feminine side. It wasn't really bold, but I wasn't, too worried about it. But after I discovered my identity, my true identity, I realized that, I had I was a woman pretending to be a man all that time. Um,
Beautiful.
and that rocked my world because when I started exploring, it was not about gender identity. I thought it was sexuality. And this was the farthest that I could ever imagine ending up at. I had no clue whatsoever. But it's fits like a glove for me. It's who I should be, who I should have always been. And
Yeah.
it's my choice, opposed to the choice that has been made for me since I came out of my mother's womb.
Thank you so much. I know, and that was a big ask on my part to say, give us a Cliff Notes version of this thing that took your whole life to really uncover. And it's almost not a fair question. So thank you for doing your best. Um, the other aspect I'm going to ask you about is sort of the caretaking role that you've been in different parts of your life. So your children called you dad, right? And they knew you in that kind of a way, and they had to go through their whole adjustment process with you. And then now we just celebrated, Father's Day. What is that piece like, navigating the change in who your children saw you as and who you saw your children as, like, and what's a day like Father's Day like for you, for example?
Father's Day this year was very, very different from me because I was like, when I first started my transition, it was like, do I really believe the stuff that I'm selling? Is this really true? Come on now. This is pretty far-fetched. And, am I doing, trying to perform what I think a woman should be from a male's perspective, which is all of my training for 63 years of the image of what womanhood is from a male perspective. I always had very big fears about that because I didn't want to do this and not be authentic to myself. So I always have problems, with previous years for Father's Day that my kids would like, Happy Father's Day, Dad. And I'm like, oh, that kind of hurts. I don't really like that. But this last Father's Day, I went throughout the whole day and I did not get one Happy Father's Day, not one single one. And I was like, wow. I messaged my kids and said, thank you for not wishing me a happy David's Day, which is my dead man, that I really love them. And I'm each and every one of them. And it was a big sea change for me. And I think it was for them too, because they no longer see dad. And that's big for me. They
Yeah.
see Yara, and Father's Day doesn't fit.
So it's kind of a mutual decision between you and your children. You're saying, let's appreciate each other other ways, other times, but let's leave this particular day out,
Yeah,
sort of
I
thing.
advocate from that side. Totally.
Say that last part again.
I advocate totally from that side. I'm gone. I left it. I left the club.
So do you have a Diera Parent Day instead? Or how does it look now?
Well, I mean, I have a problem with all these celebrations every year, every day of the year. It's
Created
like,
by Hallmark to sell cards,
right,
right?
right, and it's like, when it's African American, History Month is like, I'm black all year long, and I'm a parent all year long. I mean, these things should be celebrated all the time that we are, but not specially. Just, I mean, it's like it's Pride. I'm queer. I don't stop being queer on the 1st of July, and I don't start being queer on the 1st of June. So I mean, yeah, it's nice to acknowledge, but it's like, you know, it's Christmas.
That's
You know,
beautiful. Yeah, and it sounds like an easy way that you've worked out with your kids in terms of like, okay, we're gonna sidestep this particular day. It sounds like mutual respect and agreement around what the day and what your relationship means to each other.
well, it was more, it wasn't like I said, don't wish me Father's Day this coming year. It just didn't happen, which was more powerful than if we would have had a conversation before that I would have said, please don't do this anymore. No, they just didn't do it. So, I mean, that was much more powerful to me and said so much more to me than if I would have got them to agree not to do it.
That's beautiful. And so like last year, did they wish you?
I think I got some, and I got some not necessarily from them, but I got some from people within the community, other
Mhm.
trans women, to acknowledge, those who are assigned male at birth. those to acknowledge their sisters of that day. And
Got it.
I didn't get any of those either this year. And I didn't give any out purposely.
That's beautiful. It sounds like just an unspoken understanding of some sort, right?
Yeah, and it was like, organic and not planned, so it was really made it much more meaningful.
Beautiful. In addition to having had the experience of parenting and step parenting children, roles have reversed in in your household or in your life, and you're now kind of caregiving to the woman who brought you into the world, right?
Yeah, yeah. I take care of my mother, who is going to be 102 in September 21st of this year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's a role that I dreaded all my life as a male, having to deal with an elderly parent. I was terrified, and once I could see myself in that role and as who I am, it hasn't been difficult for me. It's been really fulfilling for me. It's it's brought out the nurturing side of me much more.
Yeah, beautiful. I remember in another interview you said that would have been a thing that David couldn't have done, but De'Ara, it's not a thing for her. She likes it.
No, because my mother suffered a stroke in 2019, and I had just transitioned in August of 2018. So I was early in my transition and very fragile in my confidence, to say the least. I wasn't to the point where I felt like I deserved to be where I was supposed to be. And I was identifying, I was being true that I wasn't appropriating. I hadn't reached that point. I had a lot of internalized transphobia, and I think we all do, at that point. But it was just that when she was coming home from the hospital and I was saddled with her care, and I didn't know if I was going to kill her or not, because I knew I wasn't ready for this. But after about the first week, De'Ara just kicked in and just, dug in and just took care of stuff. Where David would have found ways to avoid it and get away from it.
Yeah.
Maybe put her in a rest home and walk away.
It's
So
beautiful for a number of reasons, De'Ara, including the fact that your mother's a woman of a different generation, and some people might have just left this like, okay, I'm not, we're just not going to talk about this, or maybe we'll steer clear of each other. But instead, you really you literally moved in together. And when your mother has spoken about it, she's said, well, I had to go through my journey, but I worried about safety. And it seems like she's at a place of accepting you now. Is that where you've landed?
um pretty much. But my mother's journey is over 101 years, and the world that she was born into was so different than today. And the socialization that she went through, leaps and bounds more oppressive than the one I've gone through. Although I'm transgender, I'm African American, that's a lot. And a woman, which is the worst. She grew up in a time where, the only thing she could do is be an agricultural worker or marry somebody. Couldn't really go to school, couldn't really get a decent job. I mean, and for her to go through all of that, 2 world wars, and I mean, civil rights era, I mean,
And still come
that's
out as a badass, a musician, the oldest park ranger probably in the world, right? All these other kind of milestones.
yeah, in spite of all of it, in spite of all of it. So, I'm not going to say that she doesn't mourn her son. I think she still does, but I think with every day she's gaining her daughter, and she's appreciating it more and more.
That's so beautiful. And the other part that I wanted to talk to you about is unfortunate. I mean, I feel like, there's always resistance around all sorts of, there's resistance about against diversity education, or let me try this again, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work in some cases. There's pushback about critical race theory. These things we're kind of used to, but there's so many people speaking out against them. But I've been really struck by the amount of transphobia that I've seen well, I live in Lafayette. There's people who organize across from the Lafayette Elementary School. They did this every Friday after the school decided to wave the transgender pride flag. Not with an agenda other than to make sure that all children would feel accepted. But this really threatened some folks, and they stood outside each week. I mean, really, it was like one person and a couple people that she could bring with, but really digging their heels in and saying things like, what did they change DEIB to? Deliberate extinction of innocence. And really, they've branded transgender awareness incorrectly as something that's about sexuality. Or they start to talk about things like pedophilia, or trying to, and then I was also asked the question, well, when do cisgender boys and girls get recognized? And of course we said, well, like, I think every day there's a boys' bathroom, a girls' bathroom. It's in the language. So there's so much fear and resistance about this. And I wonder, how are you coping with it? And how do you navigate or respond to somebody like this?
It's not really a territory that I'm unfamiliar with because I am African American. So it's the same game plan that's always been played, demonize who you want to demonize to make them non-human so you can do anything to them. It's worked in the past, and the playbook gets played over and over. I mean, I think it was Judith Butler, a professor of literature and philosophy at UC Berkeley, put out a lecture about 2 weeks ago on gender, which was amazing. She really nailed the whole thing. That the nuclear family is, I mean, when you talk about, the religious right, and they're afraid of the family structure being ruined by the gays and all this stuff. The family structure is basically to keep everybody in line politically, sexually, gender-wise. That is the key to keeping everybody, this society, the way they want it. So they always play that anything outside of that, if the family is not that blueprint, that there's something corrupt, there's something wrong with it, can't have gay parents, can't have, same-sex parents, that's not the family, that's, there's something wrong with it. I mean, my only thing is, all the arguments that I hear online from the Matt Walshes and everybody else is that they conflate biology and gender. They're not together. They can't be. Yes, you cannot change biology 100%, but you're not born a woman or a man. You're not born a boy or a girl. We're born infants or babies. The rest we learn how to be. So you can't tell me that I cannot be 100% a woman. Okay, it is a journey. I am on my journey. I might not be at the same point that you are because you've been going through it longer, but you can't deny me that right just because what? How I was born. Now, I may never be 100% female biologically, but I've been on hormones for 7 years. What is my body telling me I am? And I have to be more female than I was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So even biologically, the needle has to have changed. So, this whole argument is crazy because, and then the argument is, I mean, what they bring up those that are assigned male at birth, the predators, men, the men. Do we have any conversation about for bathrooms for those assigned female at birth that identify as masculine? Do we have the same arguments in school sports for them? No, no. Now we make up not even 1% of the US population. So you tell me that there's more perpetrators that are assigned male at birth that identify as trans feminine than cis heterosexual men that are in prison for child pornography, for child exploitation. I mean, I'm sure some of the churches have more people in jail than we do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know. And I apologize. This is actually triggering, I think. So what this interviewee told me. So I asked her, like, what would be your plan? Like, what do you propose? And she said, well, her proposal is basically, I said that people were feeling hated by the signs she was holding. And she said, well, I feel hated. People flip me off. And I said, okay. And I said, what would be your suggestion? And what's your, and her idea was intensive therapy, and that's it, right? Like, in her mind, the existence of somebody, like, it's something that she can't understand, so she's afraid of it. And what kind of response would you give to somebody like that? Not that you need to respond to her, but to that general idea that a fair number of transphobic people seem to have.
this is on my mind quite a bit. There are those who are transphobic that are like this woman, but there are also those who purport themselves as being progressive and open that harbor transphobia too. So it's not like it's only those that are carrying signs that are protesting queer presence. It's just like systemic racism. It's in the fabric of the society. I'm a avid salsa dancer. I was a salsa dancer before I transitioned. I was known pretty much. I'm a good salsa dancer. I was known pretty good as much as who I was. And then I transitioned in that community throughout the Bay Area. And now guys are scared of me. They want to be cool, but making that walk across the room to ask me to dance, no, they can't be outed. They don't want to do it. So you can't tell me that transphobia is not ingrained in society. Even in the most progressive people, it's still there.
Right.
So
And you're talking about dancing together. You're not talking about something else, right?
we're
So
not talking about going home to get with each other. We're just talking about dancing and that's it. And, I thought dancing was about enjoyment, and I will be when I go dancing, I'm the ugliest woman in the place.
why do
That
you say that?
because that's how I'm treated. Everybody else will get to dance, even if they don't even know how to dance. I've seen feminine gay guys get asked to dance by guys before I get asked to dance.
Interestingly, I've been using dance as a metaphor so much in my writing recently, and just in so much of life experiences. So I have to ask you, what keeps you dancing? What keeps you going to dance?
I love to dance. I'd love
I love it.
it. It's my passion. But when I first started transitioning, it was like, okay, will they accept me? Is this a test of my womanhood? And at first I was really crushed by it. But then I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I won't get to be able to be a great follower because no one will ask me to follow, but I'm still a great leader. So you know what? You guys aren't going to ask me. I'm going to ask all the ladies to dance with me. And
And
they
do they dance with you?
when they look at me, they when I come up and ask, they kind of like, okay. But afterwards, it's like, oh God, you're the best dancer here. I said, well, it takes a woman to know how to dance with another woman. So
That's
I make
beautiful.
it work. I make it work, but I still, I still want to be able to follow as good as I can lead, and I don't get the opportunity, and that's all because of transphobia. But dance is only one sector of life. It goes out into all areas when it comes to transphobia, all areas. For me, it's like I went a couple weeks ago. I went out to dance, and I said, you know what? Everybody knows I'm trans. They all know when I'm walking up. They see me a block away. So I went and I put on my dress that had the trans flag on it. I'm like, I'm just gonna like, boom, I'm just putting it out there. And I think that's really what we need to do is we need to make sure everyone around us knows that we exist, that we are here, and we're just like everybody else. And that might combat the whole, I mean, what's going on now? What are the people that are passing all the laws? There's the big thing now. They're attacking drag queens. What is that saying? Drag queen is a performance, but it's attached to transness. It's
Yes.
saying,
And there
look at
seems
these men that are pretending to be women. That's why we have to can't let these men in women's spaces.
yeah,
Not
it's
even attacking us. They're attacking, most of them are gay guys making a performance. This is an art form. It's not an identity.
yes, and I've noticed that there's almost a fear that they had a drag queen story time here, and there's almost a fear that the children were going to catch it, right? Like, and it was one of the most popular events. They sang Selena songs together, and the library's perspective was like, well, libraries are for everybody. We want everybody to come, and these other people were saying, well, we should boycott the library because
So what's the difference between Drag Story Hour and Disney Princess Story Hour? What's the difference? It's all fantasy, right?
mhm,
I mean, what's the difference?
yeah,
I
valid
mean,
question.
are either of them things for people to emulate and copy? No. I think generations of women looking for Prince Charming has been made therapists a lot of money throughout the decades.
Fair point. Fair point. I want to be mindful of time because I promise not to keep you on here all day. A quick logistical question. You shared with me in passing that you were on the SF Pride Board and you decided to step down. Do you want to talk about why you decided to do that?
I don't know if I can because when
Okay.
you on those kind of boards, you got to sign all these things. But the only thing I can say is it's not. It wasn't a culture for me that I felt that was conducive to my mental health or physical health. I mean, for one, um, I take care of my mother who's 101. And being on the board of San Francisco Pride means I'm very much in the public physically and exposed to a lot of people. And I think that was too much of a risk for me to take. But I'm not that kind of a political person. I'm more like I'm a doer, and there was more politics involved than anything else. So you know, it wasn't worth my time.
Got it. And I don't know if you feel comfortable to say or not, but did you feel like it was a space that was embracing of your intersectional identity as somebody who is a caregiver, who is multiracial and all these different things? Or um
Well, I would just say that the queer community, you know, the queer community has gone through so much oppression, just like the Black community and everything else. And there's repercussions from all of it. And I think within our community, we have our divisions, you know, and it's not one happy family. I mean, I don't think anybody can say that. And, you know, within whatever group you are, there's work to be done. And there's, you know, there's things that are lingering from the past that have to be worked through. But I think, you know, Pride is a way to try to bring the community together. There's, you know, more work has to happen, definitely. Because, I mean, just the history of Pride, you know, I mean, the folks who started all the revolution weren't the ones that got the benefits from it. So, you know, those things, you know, I mean, hey, us in the Black community still looking for reparations.
Right. I know, right? The seeds are sown and hopefully generations down the line, there'll be some fruit that comes
Oh,
from.
I think that's going to be, I think there's a tidal wave coming that I'm not going to see, but my God, these kids these days give me so much hope. And I'm an eternal pessimist when I look over the world and the situation. But the kids, I work with queer kids, ages 9 through 13. And yeah, and I'll tell you, they're gonna they're gonna shake everything up. This is there. If you all have a problem with us, you wait, and they're coming strong in numbers, strong in numbers. They say in 10 years, 10% of the population is going to be queer, and probably 80% of them are going to be non-binary. So I mean, you know, this is going to be a big change. And I can't wait to ride this wave.
Diara, it's so interesting for me to hear you describe yourself as an eternal pessimist. I would have never thought of you that way.
Well, I mean, I think because of the intersections that I've lived, uh, it's hard to be optimistic because it seems like the same old thing over and over and over, just a different shade of color or whatnot, but it's the same game. And what I'm seeing now in the world, it's no different than it was 500 years ago when it boils down to it.
Yeah.
I don't see systemic change happening. I mean, if we're still fighting in this country to talk about the truth, I mean, how are we going to get over the problems that we have? If we can't have a discussion, how are we going to solve these things? If we're going to ignore what happened, history, we're going to be doomed to relive it. And I think that's exactly what we're going through.
Yes. So we're down to the last 5 here before it actually times us out. So I have to ask you, which I always ask you when I speak to you and most people, but you are somebody who waited until your 60s to start really your authentic gender identity journey. Some people might have been like, well, I think I can skate by the last, hopefully 4 decades of life just like this, but you really you did a deep dive and you came out with your authentic self or your journey to your authentic self. So my question is, it's kind of 2-part, like maybe why? And what's the most important life lesson you've learned from really embracing your authentic self in a world that has so much opposition and so, you know, the odds are even higher stacked against you with this new prong of your intersectional identity?
Well, I think for one, my belief is that your identity is not something that you can change. For me, it was more of a discovery. And once I made that discovery, I was no longer in control. So, you know, after going through my life with the intersections that were given to me, I knew that you know, I knew that my former self was not happy, was depressed, didn't know it, thought that was the way he was supposed to act and feel. That was what manhood was, because that's how he was told to be. And for me, I'm happy for the first time in my life. Is it challenging? A lot worse than it was, but I'm happy, you know? I mean, I'm happy in my own skin. Before I wasn't happy in my own skin, and the obstacles were still there. I've added some obstacles, yes, but at least I'm happy. As far as everybody else outside, good luck to them.
Yeah. I think of the quote one of my students told me, which was, "What other people think of me is not my business." Looks like you're choosing your own internal joy and happiness over what society has deemed right for you.
Making everybody else happy with me.
Beautiful. And before we sign off, if people want to keep up with you or follow you on social media, um, all those kinds of things, how can they follow you?
Oh, I don't know, because I'm like, the social media stuff is getting on my nerves.
I feel
But
you. I feel you.
you can always get a hold of me through my mother at Sign My Name to Freedom,
Okay.
her feature documentary that's in the works.
Oh yeah, you can do a quick plug for that before we go.
Yeah, well, we're in the editing process, and we are having a fundraising. So yeah, we could use some help, but Sign My Name to Freedom's on TikTok. My daughter's running the page. She is on the team, Aliana. So yeah, just reach out. We had Julietta Lewis repost something of mothers that hit, like 60, 70,000. There was another TikTok, brief but spectacular, that did 1.3 million likes. I mean,
Yeah. And the goal is really to release this film about your mother, like another aspect of your mother's identity, the aspect of her being a musician, and have this film come to fruition in the span of her lifetime. And she's at almost 102. So we got to get going on this.
we need to get going. And there'll be a big push around September on your 102nd. So save your pennies, y'all.
All
But just
right.
reach out on me. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. Um, so
Okay.
just reach
Well,
out to Malik Reid.
Tiara Reid, and then Sign My Name to Freedom we can find on lots of platforms. So
Yes.
we'll keep an eye on you and let's stay in touch. We'll talk to you soon, Tiara. Thank you so much. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride, Sharon.
All right, take good care.